Her hands were shaking as she stepped down from the stagecoach and heard the words that ended everything. The homestead burned. Lightning took it all. 3 weeks she'd crossed the desert to marry Rowan Hale, and now she stood clutching a marriage contract to a man who lived in ashes. "Get off my land!" A scarred voice roared from the ruins. But Elena Cross did not run. She set down her trunk and walked toward him. If you're watching, subscribe and follow this story to the very end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The stagecoach door hadn't been opened 3 seconds before the driver said it. "You the Cross woman?" "I am." Elena stepped down one gloved hand on the frame and straightened her spine the way her mother had taught her. "Elena Cross, I'm expected." The driver wouldn't look at her. He busied himself with the strap on her trunk, and that was the first thing that told her something was wrong. A man who'd said maybe 40 words to her in 3 weeks was suddenly very interested in a buckle. "Expected by who?" he said. "Rowan Hale." She said the name plainly without shame, because there was no shame in it. A marriage contract was a business between 2 grown people. "Mr. Rowan Hale, he sent for me." The driver set her trunk in the dirt and finally turned around. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't know how to say this gentle, so I'm going to say it plain. There ain't much of a Rowan Hale left to marry." The words landed somewhere behind her ribs and stopped. "What does that mean?" she said. "Not a question, a demand." "Means his place burned. Barn house, all of it. Lightning took the barn back in the spring, and the wind carried it to everything else." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Means the man you come to marry lost about everything a man can lose and still be breathing. I'd have written you if I'd known where. Truth is, half the town figured you wouldn't come. Figured somebody'd have sent word." Elena stood very still. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of a bench that bruised her hips of dust in her teeth of eating hard biscuits, and telling herself she was riding toward a life. She had sold nearly everything she owned that couldn't fit in one trunk. She had written a letter to the only sister who still spoke to her and told that sister not to expect another. She had crossed half a country on the strength of one man's signature, and now a stranger in the dirt was telling her she'd crossed it for ashes. "Where is he?" she said. The driver blinked. "Ma'am, Rowan Hale. Where is he? You said he's breathing. Breathing men are somewhere. You don't want—" "I did not ask what I want." Her voice came out sharper than she meant it to, and she saw 2 women on the boardwalk turn to look. She lowered it, but not the steel in it. "I asked where he is." Mini-climax. A voice answered from behind her. "He's out at the burn." She turned. A broad woman in an apron stood in the doorway of the general store, arms crossed over a chest like a fence post, studying Elena with the frank, unhurried eye of somebody who had watched a great many people come and go and had stopped being polite about it years ago. "Name's Cora Dean," the woman said. "I run the store, and I run most of the news in Harlow's Pass, whether folks like it or not. You're the bride." "I'm the bride. You're the bride nobody expected to see." Cora came down the 2 steps, wiping her hands on the apron. "Half this town had a bet on it. I had you not coming. Looks like I owe Del Ferro 2 bits. She stopped in front of Elena and looked her up and down, not unkind, but thorough. "You've got the look of a woman fixing to do something foolish. I've seen that look, usually right before somebody does the foolish thing. I'd like to know how to get to Mr. Hale's land." "Course you would." Cora sighed the sigh of a woman who had lost this argument before it started. "Elena, that your name Elena. Listen to me, because I'm going to say the true thing that nobody in this street will say to your face. That man is not the man in your contract. Whatever you were promised, it burned up with the barn. He's got no house, no stock to speak of. He's got scars that'd make a strong stomach turn, and worse than the scars, he's got a black temper on him now that would run off a saint. You're a young woman with a trunk and a train fare's worth of nothing. The kindest thing this town can do for you is buy you a seat back to wherever you came from." The driver nodded along, relieved somebody had finally said it. Elena looked at the 2 of them. At the boardwalk, women pretending not to listen. at the whole small, ugly machinery of a town that had already decided how her story ended. "You've all worked it out then," she said. "Where I go?" "We're trying to be decent," Cora said. "You're trying to be comfortable." The words came out cool. "It's more comfortable for all of you if I get back on that stage. Then nobody has to look at me and feel bad about the man in the ashes. Then it's a sad little story you tell over the counter and you go home to your suppers." Cora's jaw tightened. But something else moved behind her eyes too. Surprise maybe, or the first grudging spark of respect. "You don't know what you're saying," Cora said. "Then tell me the way," Elena said, "and let me find out." Mini-climax. Cora Dean stared at her a long moment. Then she jerked her chin west. "2 miles out that road. You'll smell it before you see it. Nothing grows on a burn like that yet, so you can't miss it." She paused. "You want a wagon?" "I'll walk. You'll walk 2 miles in that dress in this heat and arrive looking like a woman who wants pity. He'll hate you for that quicker than anything." Cora turned and hollered back into the store. "Dell, hitch the buckboard. You're driving the bride out to Hales." She looked back at Elena, and her voice dropped, gone quiet and almost gentle. "I still think you're a fool. But I'll not have it said Cora Dean sent a girl walking. Get your trunk." The wagon ride was 2 miles of the driver Del Farrow, a rangy man of maybe 60 with a mustache like a hanging broom, trying to talk her out of it in 9 different ways. "He run off the Peterson boys with a shotgun," Del said. "They only come to offer help." "Then he doesn't want help." "He like to broke a fella's jaw in the saloon in June." "Fella said something about his face." What was said? Del was quiet a second. "Don't matter. It matters if you're using it to warn me off him. What did the man say?" Del chewed his mustache. "Said Hale should have burned all the way. Said it'd have been a mercy on the eyes of the county." Elena said nothing for a moment. Then, "And you think a man who breaks a jaw over that is dangerous?" "I think a man who breaks a jaw over that is human," Elena said. "I think he's human, Mr. Farrow. Keep driving." Mini-climax. She smelled it before she saw it, exactly as Cora had promised. And then the wagon came up over a low rise, and Del drew back on the reins without being asked, because you didn't drive a man's team into another man's grief without slowing down. There it was. The homestead that was supposed to be hers. She would not let herself look at it long. She had learned in a harder life than anyone here guessed that you did not stand and stare at ruin. You looked once, you took its measure, and you decided what came next. So she looked once. Then she saw the man. He was at the far edge of the black ground, and he'd stopped whatever he was doing to watch the wagon come. Even from here, she could see how he stood, his weight thrown wrong. One shoulder, held tight like something in it, had healed crooked. He had a shovel in his hand. He held it the way another man might hold a rifle. "That's far as I go," Del said quietly. "He don't like folks coming close in a wagon. Sets him off." He looked at her, and for the first time there was no argument in his face, only a kind of sorrow. "You sure, ma'am?" "Set my trunk down here," Elena said. "You can go. I'll wait a spell, down the road, case you." "You can go, Mr. Farrow." She climbed down without help. "But thank you, truly. Tell Mrs. Dean I said she's not a fool for sending the wagon." She lifted her own trunk off the buckboard. It was heavy, and Del moved to help. And she shook her head, and he backed off, and she carried it herself, both arms straining 20 feet onto the black ground, before she set it down. Then she straightened, brushed off her gloves, and walked the rest of the way toward Rowan Hale, with her hands empty and her chin level. He watched her come the whole way. He did not move to meet her. He did not move at all. When she was close enough to speak without shouting, she stopped, and that was when he said it. "Get off my land." Mini-climax. Half his face was the face of a man who might have been handsome once. A hard jaw, a straight nose, dark eyes that had gone flat and cold as creekstone. The other half, the fire had rewritten. She made herself look at all of it, both halves evenly, the way you'd look at any man, because she understood, in one clear instant, that everything with Rowan Hale was going to come down to whether or not she looked away. She did not look away. "Mr. Hale," she said, "my name is Elena Cross. I know who you are." "Then you know why I'm here." "There's no why." His voice was wrecked, low-scraped, raw smoke she'd learned later had done that to a man's throat as surely as it did to his skin. "There's no contract worth the paper anymore. Look around you. You see a homestead. You see a man fit to keep a wife. Get back in the wagon. I'll not say it kind again." "You haven't said it kind yet." Something flickered in the flat, dark eye. Surprise quickly buried. "The wagon's leaving," she said, not turning to look, though she could hear Dell hesitating 100 yards off. "It's already leaving. Listen, there it goes." The creak and jangle of the buckboard turning the driver giving up. "So we can stand here and argue about whether I should leave, but I've no way to leave until morning. So it seems to me we're stuck with each other until then, whether you like it or not. You'll walk back to town. In this heat, in this dress, Cora Dean already told me what you'd think of a woman who did that. A ghost of something that might have been dark humor. I'd arrive looking like I wanted pity. You'd hate me for it." Her words. Rowan Hale's jaw worked. "Cora talks too much. She warned me off you 9 different ways. So did the driver. So did the whole street." Elena took 1 step closer. "Every soul in Harlow's Pass agreed I should turn around and go home. And do you know what that told me, Mr. Hale? That you should turn around and go home. That not one of them was going to help you." She let that sit. "They were all very concerned about helping me. Get the poor girl a seat back. Save her from the ruined man. Nobody in that whole town looked at your burn and thought about you. They looked at it and thought about how uncomfortable it made them." Mini-climax. That struck something. She saw it strike. The shovel came down the blade, biting into the black earth, and he leaned on it, and for one moment the crooked shoulder and the ruined face made him look not like a wall, but like a man who was very, very tired. "You don't know me," he said. "No. You don't know one thing about me. You read a letter I paid a clerk to write pretty. That's all you know." "That's true." "Then why in God's name are you still standing on my land?" Elena thought about how to answer that. She could have lied. She could have said something soft about duty or faith, or the goodness of her own heart, and maybe it would have worked, and maybe it would have made him spit. She decided on the truth, because the truth was the only thing she had that this town hadn't already offered him and had thrown back. "Because I've got nowhere else to be," she said. "And neither it seems to you." For a long moment, there was nothing between them but the wind and the smell of old fire. "I've no house," he said finally. "You understand that there's no roof. There's a camp yonder, canvas over a frame, a fire pit, a pot. That's the whole of it. There's no place to put a woman. I've slept rough before. You've—" He stopped. Looked at her again harder, like he was recalibrating something. The dress, the gloves, the careful spine. "And now I've slept rough before," said flat without drama, the way only a person who's actually done it says it. "You're a governess. That's what the contract said. Governesses don't sleep rough. This one did. Before she was a governess." Elena held his eyes. "You've got a whole story you've decided about me, Mr. Hale, same as this town's got a whole story it decided about you. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we're only half wrong. But I'll not stand here and be told what I have and haven't done by a man who's known me 4 minutes." Mini-climax. And then Rowan Hale did something that surprised even him. He laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was short and cracked, and it clearly hurt his throat, and it turned into a cough halfway through. But it was a laugh, and when it faded, he was looking at her with the first thing in his eyes that wasn't a wall, a kind of grim, exhausted astonishment. "You've got sand," he said. "I'll grant you that. You've got more sand than sense, but you've got sand. I've been told. Here's what happens now." He straightened off the shovel, and the wall came back up, but slower this time, like it took effort now. "You'll sleep in the camp tonight. I'll take the ground. In the morning, I'll walk you back to town myself, and I'll put you on the eastbound stage, and I'll pay your fare from what little I've got left. Because it's the last thing I can do, like a man ought. And that'll be the end of it. You'll go home, and you'll marry some clerk with an unburned face, and a house that stands, and in 10 years you'll tell this story at a supper, and everyone'll say what a narrow escape you had. Do you understand me? I understand what you're saying. That's not the same as agreeing. No, Elena said. It isn't. He shook his head, but the fight had gone out of it. He turned and started toward the camp, walking with that crooked, careful gait, and after a moment he said over his shoulder, gruff as gravel, "Well, you coming, or you going to stand in the ash all night?" She picked up her own trunk again, before he could not offer to carry it, and followed. Retention hook. Mini climax. The camp was worse than he'd made it sound, and exactly as bad as she'd expected, which is to say, she had already decided not to react to it, and she didn't. A canvas lean-to, a fire pit, a blackened pot, a saddle he apparently used for a pillow, a rifle, a tin cup, one which he filled from a water barrel and set on a flat stone near the fire, and pushed toward her side without a word, and then looked embarrassed that he'd done it, and looked away. That one cup told her more than an hour of talk. "Have you eaten?" she asked. "I eat." "That's not what I asked. I'll not have you cooking my supper the first night like some—" He cut himself off. "Like some wife," Elena said mildly. His mouth pressed flat. "I wasn't going to cook your supper," she said. "I was going to cook mine because I'm hungry, and I've been on a stagecoach 3 weeks. If there's enough in that pot for 2, that's your business. If there isn't, I'll thank you to point me at the flour." She was already unpinning her sleeves, already rolling them, and he watched her do it with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm not helpless, Mr. Hale. That's the thing your town got wrong about me, and I suspect it's the thing you're about to get wrong too. Everyone keeps deciding I'm a delicate creature in need of saving. I've never in my life needed saving. What I need is a purpose and a place to put my hands. Those I've generally had to make myself." He didn't answer, but he pointed at a small sack near the water barrel. Flour. She made biscuits in a burned pot over another man's fire, and she made them well, and when they were done, she put more than half of them on his side. He looked at the pile. "That's yours. I made them. That makes them mine to give. Eat, Mr. Hale. A man can't be proud on an empty stomach. It comes out mean, and I've had enough mean today from an entire town." Mini climax. He ate. She saw how fast he ate and how he tried to hide how fast, and she understood that "I eat" had been a lie, or near enough that this was the most food this man had put in his body at one sitting in some time. She said nothing about it. She had learned that too in her hard years, that the kindest thing you could do for a starving man's pride was to look at the fire instead of at his hands. For a while neither of them spoke. The fire cracked. Somewhere off in the dark, a coyote asked its question and got no answer. "How'd it happen?" she said at last, quietly. "The fire." She felt him go stiff beside her. "You don't have to tell it," she said. "I only mean, I'll be gone in the morning by your telling. So it costs you nothing to say it once to somebody who won't be here to hold it against you. Sometimes it's easier to say a thing to a person who's leaving." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in that scraped and ruined voice, looking at the fire and not at her, Rowan Hale told her. "Storm come up in the night, spring. Lightning hit the barn. I'd got a dry season stacked hay to the rafters, prime feed worth more than the barn itself. Went up like a torch." His hand, she noticed, had closed slowly into a fist on his knee. "I had 2 horses in there, a mare and her colt. The mare she'd been my wife's, before. Ellen's mare." He stopped. "You knew I was a widower." "The contract said." "Then you know I already buried 1 woman on this land before you ever got here. I don't—" His voice went rougher. "The mare was the last thing of Ellen's that still breathed. So I went in for her. That's how I got this." He didn't touch his face. He only tipped his head at it, a small, bitter gesture. "Got the mare and the colt out. Roof came down as I cleared the door, and I stood in the yard holding 2 shaking horses and watched my house catch from the sparks and I could not do one single thing to stop it. Not one thing. I'd used everything I had getting the horses out, and there was nothing left in me to save the house. So I watched it burn. Everything Ellen and me built. Everything I built after she died to keep from going mad. All of it. In one night. Major twist the horses. Elena was quiet. Then she said carefully, "The horses. The mare and the colt. Where are they now?" Something crossed his ruined face, a flinch, sharp and involuntary, and she knew before he said it that she'd found the wound under the wound. "I sold them," he said. The words came out like they cost blood. 3 weeks after. Had no barn, no feed, no money, no way to winter them. Had to sell my own horses to a man in the next county for a fraction of worth because a starving man can't keep animals for sentiment. His fist was white on his knee now. "So you tell me, Elena Cross. You tell me what kind of man burns his own face off to save his dead wife's mare, and then turns around 6 weeks later and sells her for grocery money. What kind of man is that?" His voice cracked wide open on the last of it. "Because I've been sitting in this ash all summer trying to work it out, and I can't. I don't know who that man is. I don't know who I am anymore. I only know he's got my face half of it, and he's the sorriest excuse for a—" "Stop," Elena said. He stopped. Not because she'd ordered it. Because of how she'd said it, not soft, not pitying, but hard, almost angry. The way you'd stop a man from stepping off a ledge. "You want me to tell you what kind of man that is?" she said. "I'll tell you. That's a man who did the impossible thing and the necessary thing both, and he's punishing himself for the second because he can't forgive himself for surviving the first." She held his stare. "You didn't sell that mare because you stopped loving your dead wife. You sold her because you chose to live. And some broken part of you has decided that living is the one thing you weren't supposed to do." Mini-climax. He stared at her. The fire snapped. And for one raw, unguarded second, the wall was simply gone, and what was behind it was not a hard man, or a mean man, or a dangerous man. It was a man who had been drowning alone all summer, and had just heard for the first time another human being name the water. Then he looked away hard, and dragged the wall back up, and his voice came out cruel, because cruel was the only shield he had left. "You don't know one damn thing about it," he said. "Governess plays philosopher over a stranger's fire. That the trick is it, that how you'd have kept a husband, read him like a primer, tell him what he feels. You'd have driven me to drink in a month." She didn't flinch. She'd been braced for this the moment she saw his face go soft, because she'd known the softness would frighten him, and she'd known the fright would come out as a swing. "There it is," she said quietly. "There what is. The mean. Pharaoh warned me about it. You show a man like you one moment of real understanding, and he's got to hit back twice as hard, because the understanding's more dangerous to him than any insult. An insult he can fight. Understanding he can't." She stood and brushed off her skirts businesslike. "It's late. You said I'd sleep in the camp. I'll take you up on that. And in the morning, we'll see about that stage." He watched her wrong-footed the swing, having hit nothing but air. "You're a strange woman," he said finally. "I've been told that too." She paused at the edge of the canvas. "Mr. Hale, one more thing and then I'll leave you to the fire. You told me your story tonight because you thought I'd be gone by morning and it'd cost you nothing." She looked back at him. "I want you to know it didn't work. It cost you plenty. Because now I know something true about you, and I'm not the kind to forget a true thing once I've got it. You'll not scare me off with meanness, and you'll not shame me off with your poverty, and I've decided I don't much care what the town thinks. So sleep on that. We'll talk in the morning." Retention hook. She did not sleep much. Neither did he. She could hear him out by the fire, not moving a man, keeping watch over nothing, over ashes, over the ghost of a house. Once near the deepest part of the night, she heard him say something low. Not to her, she thought, but to the dark, or to the mare that wasn't there, or to Ellen. She could not make out the words. She did not try to. In the gray before dawn, she rose and pinned her hair, and came out to find the fire built up, and coffee, real coffee from somewhere, some hidden last reserve heating in the tin. He'd made it. He was pretending he hadn't made it for her. He'd set out 1 cup. Only now there were 2 cups. She looked at the second cup. He'd found it, or bought it, or dug it out of the ashes, a battered, half-melted tin thing cleaned as best it could be. Set beside the first. 2 cups where last night there'd been 1. Neither of them said a word about it. She poured for both. "About that stage?" she said, sitting down across the fire from him. "About that stage," he agreed. And she could see he'd spent the whole sleepless night rehearsing how he'd put her on it. His jaw was set for the fight. "I've been thinking," Elena said before he could start. "And I've a proposal for you. Not a marriage. Set the contract aside, burn it with the rest if you like. I don't care about the paper. I mean a plain business proposal, the kind 2 grown people can make across a fire." Mini-climax. He went still, wary. "I've nothing to make a proposal with. I've a shovel and a rifle and a burned quarter section." "You've got the land," she said. "The land didn't burn. The land's still yours free and clear. You proved up on it." "I proved up. 5 years. The patent's in a strongbox in Cora Dean's back room. Only thing of mine that didn't burn because I'd left it in town." A pause. "How'd you know to ask that?" "Because I've read more contracts than you'd guess, and land is land, whether the house on it stands or not." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "So, you've got land and no means to work it, and I've got," she chose the word carefully, "means. And no land of my own, and no place in this world, and no wish to crawl back east and marry a clerk to be looked after. I'd rather build something than be kept in something. I suspect you would too." "What means?" he said. Slow, suspicious. "A governess's wages don't build a homestead." Elena set down her cup. She had rehearsed this through the sleepless night, same as he'd rehearsed the stage, because she understood better than he did, yet that the words she said next would decide everything, that a proud man could take a partner, but not a purse, could take a hand, but not a handout, and that the whole future turned on which one she made it sound like. She got it wrong. She didn't know it yet, but looking back later, she'd know this was the moment, the first hairline crack in everything they'd try to build, because she led with the number instead of the meaning. "I've $12,000, Elena Cross said. Major twist, mini cliffhanger. The words fell into the fire like a stone into still water. Rowan Hale did not move, did not blink. For a long, terrible moment, he simply looked at her, and she watched too late as a dozen things crossed his ruined face all at once. Astonishment, disbelief. And then rising under both of them, slow and cold and unmistakable, the very thing she'd stayed up all night trying to avoid. Shame. $12,000, he repeated. Very quiet. Saved and inherited over years. It's honest money. Every dollar of it is mine, earned or left to me. No strings on it. No man with a claim. She was talking too fast now. She could hear herself talking too fast, trying to outrun the look on his face. It's enough to rebuild everything. The house, the barn, buy back stock, better stock than you had. It's enough to hire the work done before winter. Rowan, it's enough to make this land yours again properly. Yours standing and stocked, and... Stop! She stopped. He stood up. Slowly, with that crooked care, and he stood over the fire with the gray dawn light on the ruined half of his face, and when he spoke, his voice was not mean this time. That was somehow worse. It was quiet and level and final. You came out here, he said, with a fortune in your trunk, $12,000. And you looked at me at this, at the burn and the ash and the man who sold his dead wife's horse for grocery money, and you thought there's a project. There's a broken thing I can fix with my money. No, you want to build me a house, Elena Cross. He said it like the worst accusation one person could make of another. You want to pay for my land to stand up again. You want to hire men to hammer up walls I couldn't raise myself. And then what? Then I live in it. A man in a house, another person's money, built in a town that already thinks the fire should have finished me. You know what they'd call me. You know the word they'd use down at Cora Dean's over the counter when I walked past. Rowan. They'd call me a kept man. His whole body was shaking now, but his voice never rose, and that stillness was the most frightening thing about him. And they'd be right. He turned and walked 3 steps away from the fire and stopped with his back to her. His crooked shoulder held tight, staring out at the black ground where his house used to stand. "You should have lied," he said, not turning around. "You should have said you had a little, enough to help. I might have, God help me. I might have said yes to a little, to a partner." His voice dropped so low she barely caught it. "But $12,000 isn't a partner, Elena. $12,000 is an owner. And I've buried a wife and a barn and 2 horses and my own face on this land, and it is the last thing I've got, and I will not hand it to a stranger to buy back for me like I'm a debt." She took a fancy to settling. The fire cracked between them, and Elena Cross sat very still on the cold ground, holding a tin cup that had been set out for her that morning by a man who'd found a second cup in the night, and understood with a slow sinking certainty that she had just crossed 3 weeks of desert to save a drowning man, and had reached out her hand, and had somehow in reaching been the very thing that pushed him back under. "Then we'll do it another way," she said quietly to his back. "Whatever way lets you keep your pride. I don't care about the how. I only came to build something, Rowan. I never once came to own you." He didn't answer. He stood with his back to her, and his shoulders shaking, and the sun came up over the ashes of his life, and neither of them moved for a long, long time. She let him have his silence for exactly as long as it took her to drink her coffee. Then she set the cup down on the flat stone with a small deliberate click, and stood and said, "All right, you won't take my money. I heard you. So let's talk about what you will take." Rowan turned halfway. "There's nothing to work," Elena said. "You'll take work, won't you? A man's own 2 hands. That much pride'll allow." She crossed to her trunk and threw back the lid and started pulling out the plain gray dress she'd packed at the bottom, the one she'd worn scrubbing floors in a life she hadn't told him about yet. "I'm going to change out of this traveling dress. And then you're going to show me every inch of this land, and we're going to figure out what can be done with 2 backs and no money at all. Not my money. No money. Just work. That suit your pride better." He stared at her. "You're not listening. The stage comes through Thursday," she said. "Cora told me yesterday in between telling me I was a fool. It's Sunday. So you've got till Thursday to get rid of me. Mr. Hale, and I've got till Thursday to change your mind. And in the meantime, there's no earthly reason we should both sit in the ash feeling sorry for ourselves when there's a fence line down and a well half-choked with debris." She pointed at the well without looking at it, because she'd clocked it yesterday the way she clocked everything. "I saw it when I walked in. You've been hauling water from the creek a 1/4 mile off because you haven't the heart to clean out your own well. Am I right?" Mini-climax. His jaw tightened, which was answer enough. "I'm right," she said. "So, we clean the well. That's not charity. That's not my $12,000. That's 2 people and a bucket. Even a proud man can't call clean water a handout." For a moment she thought he'd refuse out of pure contrariness. She watched him want to. She watched him look for the insult in it and fail to find one, and she understood that this was the whole shape of the war she'd be fighting. That with Rowan Hale, she'd have to disguise every kindness as labor, every gift as a chore, every rescue as a job that simply needed doing and happened to need doing by her. "You'll ruin that dress," he said at last, grudging, which was she'd learn as close to yes as the man came. "It's already ruined. It's been ruined since before you were widowed." She stepped behind the canvas to change. "Fetch the rope and the bucket. And Mr. Hale, don't you dare clean it out yourself before I'm back to spite me. I'll know." She heard from the other side of the canvas a sound she wouldn't have believed the day before. A low, rusty, unwilling breath of a laugh. They cleaned the well. It took the whole of that Sunday, and it was filthy, brutal work, and she did not once flinch from it. He lowered her down part-way on the rope against every instinct in his body because she flatly refused to be the one holding the rope for him. "You've a bad shoulder. You'll drop me, and then we've both got problems. My shoulders are sound, so I go down and you haul up. That's just arithmetic." And he could not argue with the arithmetic, though she saw it cost him something to admit she was right about his shoulder, that she'd seen the weakness, and named it plain instead of pretending it wasn't there. She came up black to the elbows with the last of the rotted debris. He hauled the buckets. By evening the water ran clean and cold, and they both drank from it, and she watched him drink water from his own well for the first time since spring, and she saw on his ruined face something she filed carefully away and did not comment on. It was the first thing he'd let himself have in months that he hadn't had to feel ashamed of, mini-climax. "That's one thing," she said, wiping her hands. "There's your proof, Mr. Hale. A day's work between us and now you've clean water. No fortune spent. Did the town fall down? Did anybody call you a kept man for it?" Nobody saw it. Somebody always sees. This is a small county. By Wednesday, Cora Dean will know we cleaned your well together, and she'll have opinions about it. Doesn't change that we did it, and doesn't change that it needed doing. She sat down heavy by the fire, more tired than she'd let him see. "That's the thing you've got backwards. You think the shame is in being helped. The shame's in letting a thing rot because you're too proud to let anybody near it. Your well, your land, your—" She stopped herself before she said your grief. He caught it anyway. He always caught the ones she didn't finish. "Say it," he said. "It's not my place. You've said a great deal that's not your place since you got off that stage. Don't turn shy now." There was an edge in it, but not a cruel one, something more like a dare. "Your what? Finish it." Elena looked at him across the fire. "Your marriage," she said. "You let your grief rot same as the well, because you're too proud to let anybody near it. You'd rather sit in the wreck of it alone than have one living soul stand in the ash beside you. Because if somebody stood beside you, you might have to admit you can't carry it alone. And you'd sooner die than admit that. About the house, about the horses, about Ellen, about any of it." Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. The name landed like a slap. She saw him take it. She braced for the meanness, the swing the governess plays philosopher, but it didn't come. Instead, he was quiet a long moment, and then he said something that changed the shape of everything she thought she understood about him. "Ellen didn't die of a fever," Rowan said. Elena went still. "That's what the town thinks. That's what I let them think because it's easier." He stared into the fire. "There was a winter 4 years back. Hard one. We'd lost the crop to hail in the summer, and we went into the cold with near nothing. And I was too proud to ask Cora for credit at the store. Same pride you see it, I know you see it. Ellen was carrying our first. And she got weak, and then she got sick, and I kept saying, we'd manage, we'd get through. I'd not go begging to the town. And I waited too long to ride for the doctor, because the doctor cost money we didn't have, and I was ashamed to owe it." His voice had gone flat and dead. "She died in our bed with the baby still in her. Both of them. Because I was too proud to owe a doctor $8. The fire cracked. Somewhere the coyote asked its question again. "So you see," he went on. And now there was something almost gentle in the ruin of his voice, almost kind, and it was the most terrible thing she'd ever heard. "When you sit there and tell me my pride's the thing that's killing me. I know, Elena. I know it better than you'll ever know it. My pride already killed the only woman who ever loved me and the child we made together. I've had 4 years to learn that lesson, and I still can't lay the pride down. I stood in the yard this spring and let my house burn because some part of me wouldn't run for help fast enough. It's a sickness. It's the only thing the fire didn't take. So don't sit there thinking you'll fix it in 5 days with a clean well and a clever tongue. Better women than you have died trying." Mini climax. Elena did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was quieter than he'd yet heard it, and steadier. And there was something in it that made him look up. "I'm going to tell you something now," she said, "that I've told exactly 2 living people. And I'm telling you because you just handed me the worst thing you own, and it isn't right for me to take it and give you nothing back. That's not partnership. Partnership means we both stand in the ash." He waited. "My $12,000, she said. "You've been carrying it around in your head all day like it's some clean fortune. governess wages, and a tidy inheritance. That's what I let you think. That's what I let everyone think." She looked at him level. 4,000 of it is an inheritance from an aunt, honest and clean, that part's true. The other 8,000, she drew a breath. The other 8,000 is blood money, Rowan. There's no prettier word for it. I was a governess for a family in St. Louis, a wealthy family. The man of the house, the father, he was not a good man. To me, or to the girls, I was hired to teach. I stayed longer than I should have because I loved those children, and I thought I was protecting them. And one night, he came to my room, and I understood I'd stayed too long, and I understood no one would take the word of a governess over a rich man, and I understood I had one thing that would work where the truth wouldn't. She held his eyes. I'd found his ledgers. He'd been cheating his own brother out of a family fortune for years, forging figures, hiding accounts. I understood numbers. That's part of why they'd hired me to teach the girls their sums. So I made him a proposal, same as I made you across this fire. $8,000 and a letter of reference in a clean hand, and I'd walk out and never speak a word of the ledgers or the night he came to my room. He paid it. Gladly. It was pennies to him to make a governess disappear. Her jaw was tight now. So that's my fortune, Mr. Hale. 4,000 honest, and 8,000 I got by looking a wicked man in the eye and making him pay to keep me quiet. And I've carried it 3 years, and I've never once felt clean about it. And when I answered your contract, I thought maybe out here on a homestead in a plain hard life, I could turn dirty money into something honest. Turn it into walls and fields and a real thing that stands. Maybe that would wash it. Major twist. Rowan Hale stared at her across the fire. You didn't want to buy me, he said slowly, understanding it. You wanted to. I wanted to launder my own soul, Elena said. And I was going to use your ruined homestead to do it, and I never once thought to ask whether you'd want to be the thing I cleaned myself on. So when you called it charity this morning, you weren't even right. And that's the worst part. It was never charity. It was me trying to buy back my own peace with money I'm ashamed of, and dressing it up as saving you. Her voice cracked just slightly for the first time since she'd stepped off the stage. You're not the only proud fool sitting at this fire, Rowan. I just hide mine better. I've been hiding it so long I nearly hid it from myself. The silence between them now was different from every silence that had come before. It was not the silence of two strangers, or of a man refusing a woman, or of pride facing pity. It was the silence of two people who had each just set their worst thing down on the ground between them, and were waiting to see if the other would pick it up and use it as a weapon. Neither of them did. Well, Rowan said at last, rough. That's a hell of a thing to say to a man before breakfast. It's evening. Feels like it ought to be breakfast. Feels like we've lived a week since you got off that stage. He rubbed his good hand over the unburned half of his face, tired to the bone. Elena, that man, the one in St. Louis, did he... He stopped, started again, and there was a low, dangerous quiet in it now, protective in a way that surprised them both. The night he came to your room, did he... No, she said. I got the door bolted in time, barely. That's why the ledgers worked. He didn't know how close he'd come to being able to just take what he wanted and be done with me. He thought he still had something to lose. If he'd got the door open first, he'd have known better, and I'd have gotten nothing, and I'd likely be dead in the Mississippi. She said it plainly the way she said everything, but he saw her hands were not quite steady. So, now you know the true shape of the fortune you were too proud to take. Blood and luck and a bolted door. Still think it's too clean for the likes of you. Mini-climax. And Rowan Hale did a thing then that he had not done in front of another living person in 4 years. He reached across the fire, the crooked shoulder, the ruined hand, and he set his hand over hers, over both her not quite steady hands, and he held them still. I think he said that you and I have both been carrying the same sickness. Different fevers, same sickness. You think that money makes you dirty, so you've got to launder it, or you can't rest. And I think being helped makes me nothing, so I've got to refuse it, or I can't rest. And we're both wrong, Elena. We're both so wrong. We came 3 weeks and half a country to find the one other person stubborn enough to prove it to us. His grip tightened gentle. That money's not dirty. You took it from a wicked man to save your own life. That's not blood money. That's justice that happened to come in dollars. And me refusing help isn't strength. It's the same pride that killed Ellen wearing a different coat. Elena looked down at his hand over hers. You said it yourself, she whispered. This morning. You can't lay the pride down. Better women than me have died trying. I know what I said. So what changed between morning and evening? Rowan was quiet. Then, you told me the truth about a bolted door and $8,000 and a wicked man when you could have just gotten on the stage Thursday and kept your secret forever. His thumb moved once across her knuckles. Nobody's told me the truth since Ellen died. Not one soul. The whole town lies to my face. You're looking better. Hail, the scars are fading. Hail lies all of it, and I can smell every one. You're the first person since the fire who's looked at me and said a true thing, even a hard one, especially the hard ones. He let go of her hands slowly, like it cost him. Maybe that's worth more than pride. I don't know. I've never had it to weigh against pride before. Retention hook. Mini cliffhanger. They sat with that. And then Elena, because she was who she was, because she could not let a soft moment sit, for fear it would soften her past the point of usefulness, said, Does that mean you'll take the money? Rowan barked that rusty, painful laugh. God, you don't quit. I've been told. No. But it was a different no than the mornings. Not the money. Not yet. Maybe not ever, I don't know. But... He looked at the ash where his house had stood, and then back at her. There's a thing between the money and the pride. There's a middle way, and I've been too stubborn to look for it. You want to build something honest with dirty money, and I want to keep my land without being kept. So what if it's a loan, not a gift? A loan with papers drawn up proper in Cora Dean's back room, where the town can see them at interest with me owing every dollar back, and them all knowing I owe it. Not a woman's charity to a broken man. A debt between two partners with my name on the note and my sweat as the collateral. His jaw set. I can carry a debt. I can't carry charity. But a debt I choose with terms that I mean to pay to the last cent that I can look the town in the eye over. Because it makes me a man who borrowed to rebuild, not a man who got rebuilt. Elena felt something in her chest go very still and very careful. Because it was progress. It was real progress, more than she'd hoped for by Thursday. And it was also, she understood, with a cold little drop of foresight, the exact seed of everything that could still go wrong. A proud man who could only accept help if it came with a debt he'd kill himself to repay. But she was too glad in that moment to look hard at the danger in it. She wanted the yes too badly, mini climax. Alone, she said. With papers. At interest. At interest. Fair interest, none of your governess charity dressed up. If I owe you real. And you'd stay. You'd rebuild. You'd let me stand in the ash beside you. I'd let you... He stopped, corrected himself, and she saw what the correction cost him. Saw him choose the harder, honest word over the easy, proud one. I'd want you to. There. That's the truest thing I've said all day. And it near choked me. Is that what you wanted? A man saying he wants you to stay? Because I'll tell you. Elena Cross. I don't say it easy, and I won't say it twice. So you'd best have heard it the once. And Elena Cross, who had faced down a wicked man over a ledger, who had crossed 3 weeks of desert to marry a stranger who had not wept when the driver told her the homestead had burned, nor when she saw the ruin of his face. Nor through a single hard hour since Elena Cross put her filthy, well-blackened hand over her mouth and looked at the fire, so he wouldn't see her eyes go bright. I heard it, she said when she could. The once. I heard it. Good. He got up gruff done with feeling things more feeling done in one evening than in a year. Then in the morning we ride to town and we draw up the papers, and you can stop threatening me with the Thursday stage, because I'll not be needing you on it." He paused at the edge of the firelight, and his voice changed, went almost shy, went somewhere she hadn't heard it go. "The contract, the marriage one. I meant what I said. Burn it if you want. I'll not hold a woman to a paper she signed before she knew my face. But if you were to, that is if once the walls were up and the thing was real and you'd had time to look at me in daylight and not run if you were to want to talk about that paper again. Someday. When it wasn't about the money or the land or any of it." He couldn't finish. He just stood there, half his face in shadow and half in ruin, waiting. "Someday," Elena agreed softly. "When it isn't about any of that, yes, I'd want to talk about it again." Mini climax. He nodded once sharp and fled into the dark to check on nothing the way men do when they've felt too much and need a horse to pretend to tend to even when there's no horse left to tend. She let him go. And in the morning, they rode to town. Cora Dean looked up from her counter when the two of them walked in together. Elena in her ruined gray dress, and Rowan Hale with his hat pulled low, and Cora's eyebrows climbed clear up under her gray hair, because it was one thing to hear a fool girl had gone out to the burn, and quite another to see her walk back into town 3 days later at the ruined man's side, upright and easy, like she belonged there. "Well," Cora said, "I'll be. You're still here." "I'm still here. And you." Cora looked at Rowan and something moved in her weathered face, some old complicated thing. "You brung her to town, on purpose, walking in the front door." "We've business," Rowan said shortly. "Legal business. That patent of mine in your back room. And we'll need a witness to some papers, and I reckon you're the biggest mouth in the county, so if it's witnessed by you, it's witnessed by everybody, and that suits me fine. I want it witnessed by everybody." Mini climax. Cora Dean set down the bolt of cloth she'd been folding. "Rowan Hale," she said slowly. "In 11 years I have watched you turn away every hand this town ever put out to you. I watched you run off the Peterson boys with a shotgun for offering to raise you a barn. I watched you break Tom Alder's jaw in my brother-in-law's saloon. I have watched you sit out on that burn all summer like a dog on a grave, and every soul in Harlow's Pass gave up on you by July." She came around the counter. "And now you walk in my door with a governess, and you tell me you want something witnessed by everybody. What in the name of God did this woman do to you in 3 days?" Rowan Hale was quiet a moment. Then he said in that scraped and ruined voice, loud enough for the two women browsing calico by the window to hear, loud enough for the news to be all over the county by supper, exactly as he intended. "She told me the truth, that's all. She's the only one in this whole town ever did." And Cora Dean, who had known him boy and man, who had extended the credit, his pride wouldn't take. The winter Ellen died, and never once told him she'd guessed why the girl really passed. Cora Dean looked at Elena Cross with new eyes, and what she saw there made her nod slowly once, like a woman conceding a bet far larger than 2 bits. "2 bits I owe Dell," she murmured. "Cheap at the price. Come on back then, both of you. Let's draw up your papers." At the doorway to the back room, she stopped and looked at Elena one more time, and her voice dropped low just between the two women. "I told you that man would run off a saint. I was wrong. Turns out he just needed one who'd run at him instead of away." She jerked her chin. "Don't you let him talk you into terms that let him kill himself paying you back. I know that pride. It don't heal. It just hides. You watch it." Major twist / mini cliffhanger. Elena felt the warning settle cold in her stomach even as the morning went bright with everything going right. Because Cora Dean had said out loud the exact thing Elena had refused to look at square the night before. That a debt Rowan chose was better than charity, he refused. Yes. But a debt Rowan chose was also a debt. Rowan would break his own back to repay. And there was no ceiling on what a man like that would sacrifice to owe no one. She'd handed him the loan because it was the only bridge his pride would cross. She hadn't let herself count the cost of what waited on the other side. They signed the papers that morning in Cora Dean's back room. A loan drawn proper at fair interest, Rowan's name on the note, and his land as collateral, and Cora and Del Ferro as witnesses. So the whole county would know by Sunday that Rowan Hale had borrowed to rebuild and meant to pay. Elena signed as the lender. They did not sign the marriage contract. That paper stayed folded in her trunk, unburned, unmentioned, waiting for a someday they'd both agreed to without quite daring to name. And that afternoon, the first wagon of lumber was ordered, and the first workers were hired for the following week, and Rowan Hale stood in the road outside Cora Dean's store and looked west toward his land and said mostly to himself in a voice with something in it Elena hadn't heard before, something that might, in a whole man, in an unbroken man, have been the beginning of hope. "We'll have walls up before the first snow." Elena watched the side of his ruined face, as he said. It watched the good eye catch the light, and she let herself believe, just for that one bright afternoon, that the hardest part was already behind them. She was wrong, but she didn't know it yet. And for that one afternoon, standing in the road with the loan papers drying in her bag, and a proud man daring to say, "We," she let herself be wrong, and she let herself be glad, and she did not think about the low certain warning in Cora Dean's voice, or the ceiling that a man like Rowan Hale would never ever put on his own repaying. The lumber came the following Tuesday. And the trouble came with it. The trouble came riding on the second wagon, and its name was Silas Vane. He came out to the burn the same Tuesday, the lumber did, and he came in a good coat and a clean hat, and he sat his horse at the edge of the black ground and watched 4 hired men stack fresh pine where a house used to stand, and he smiled the whole time, like a man watching something he found privately amusing. Rowan saw him first. Elena watched Rowan go still. That particular stillness, she'd learned, meant the wall was coming up fast, and she set down the water bucket she'd been carrying to the workers and came to stand beside him. "Friend of yours?" she asked quietly. "No friend." Rowan's voice had gone flat. "That's the man bought my horses." Mini climax. The rider walked his horse forward, unhurried, and drew up a polite distance off and touched his hat brim to Elena first, which she noted, because a man who tipped his hat to the woman before he spoke to the man was a man who'd already worked out where the money was. "Miss Cross, I take it." Vane's voice was smooth as poured cream. "Word travels. Governess from back east come out with a purse and a soft heart for a burned-out homesteader. The whole county's talking of nothing else." He looked past her at the rising frame of the house, at the lumber, at the hired men. "And here I thought Rowan Hale was finished. Shows what a man knows. Silas Vane, ma'am. I run cattle 2 counties over, and I've an interest in land hereabouts. Several interests." He smiled. "You might say I collect the pieces men leave behind when their luck runs out." "We're not leaving anything behind," Elena said. "As you can see. So I do see. So I do." Vane's eyes moved over the work, calculating. "Rebuilding. On borrowed money, they say. A loan drawn up all legal in Cora Dean's back room at interest Hale's own land put up as collateral." He let that word sit, collateral, and Elena felt the first cold prickle of understanding at the back of her neck. A man's land as security against a debt. Well now, that's a document I'd surely like to read someday. Rowan spoke for the first time. "You'll not read it." Mini-climax. "No." Vane turned to him, and the smile stayed, but the eyes went hard. "You still sore about those horses, Hale? I paid you a fair price. Cash money when you needed it. When nobody else in 3 counties would give a burned man a nickel. You came to me. Remember that. You rode to my place with your face still weeping, and you sold me your dead wife's mare for grocery money, and you took my cash, and you were glad to get it." He watched that land, watched it hit exactly where he'd aimed it. "Don't you stand there and act like I did you a wrong. I did you the only kindness you'd take." Elena felt Rowan's whole body change beside her, felt the shame flood him, the old wound reopening, and she understood in a flash of cold clarity that Silas Vane had come out here for exactly this, not to buy anything, not to threaten anything openly, but to find the crack in Rowan Hale and drive a wedge into it and start it splitting. He'd come to remind Rowan of the worst thing he'd ever done. He'd come to make sure the shame stayed fresh. "He came to you," Elena said, stepping half a pace forward, putting herself in Vane's line of sight, "because you'd have known he was desperate and priced accordingly. That's not kindness, Mr. Vane. That's a butcher calling himself a friend to the calf." You gave him a fraction of what those animals were worth because you knew he'd no choice, and now you've ridden 2 counties to remind him of it. Which tells me the horses aren't what you're after at all." She held his eyes. "You're after the land. You always were. You just needed him broken enough to sell it, and now I've come and spoiled it by building the house back up, so here you are. Come to see what got in your way." Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. Silas Vane looked at Elena Cross for a long moment, and the smile finally fully dropped, and what was underneath it was not warm at all. "You're a sharp one," he said softly. "Sharper than the last governess I dealt with." He gathered his reins. "But let me tell you something about loans and collateral, Miss Cross, since you're new to this country and its ways. A man puts up his land against a debt, and a debt has terms, and terms have a payment schedule, and a payment schedule can be met or it can be missed. And when a debt against land goes unpaid, he let it hang well. The land goes to whoever holds the paper. That's the law out here, same as everywhere. Doesn't matter who sweats in the walls. Paper's paper. The paper's held by me," Elena said, "and I've no intention of foreclosing on my own partner." "Now," Vane smiled again, and this time it was worse. "You've no intention now. But paper can be sold, Miss Cross. Bought and sold like anything else. A note against good land, that's a valuable thing. And a woman alone in hard country? A woman with a past she came all this way to outrun." He watched her go, rigid, watched it land, and she understood he'd been asking questions in St. Louis, or knew someone who had or was simply guessing at the shape of a governess with $8,000 and no husband, and was gambling on the guess. A woman like that might find someday that she'd rather have cash in hand and a clean start somewhere new than a piece of paper tying her to a scarred man and a county full of talk. And when that day comes, he touched his hat. "You'll know where to find me. I pay fair. I always pay fair. Ask Hale." He turned his horse and rode off the burn at an easy walk in no hurry at all, a man who'd planted what he came to plant and was content to let it grow. Mini climax. Elena stood in the ash and understood all at once and too late the full shape of the thing she'd built. She'd made Rowan a loan because it was the only help his pride would take. She'd put his land up as collateral because that was what made it a real debt instead of charity. And a real debt was the only thing he could look the town in the eye over. And in doing the one thing that saved his pride, she had handed a man like Silas Vane the exact instrument he needed. A note against the land, a thing that could be bought and sold. A wedge that only needed the debt to go unpaid, or the note to change hands to pry Rowan Hale off his own ground forever. She'd known there was danger in it. Cora had warned her. She'd let herself be too glad to look. Now she looked. "Rowan," she said. But Rowan Hale was not looking at her. He was looking at the road where Vane had gone, and his ruined face had set into something she hadn't seen before. Something worse than the meanness, worse than the walls. It was a kind of terrible resolve. "He's right," Rowan said. "He is not right. He's a vulture. He came out here to—" "He's right that I sold her." Rowan's voice was very quiet. "He's right that I came to him with my face weeping, and took his cash and was glad." Every word of that was true, Elena. That's why it cuts. You can't bleed a man with a lie. Only the truth cuts. He turned and looked at the rising frame of the house, at the hired men, at the lumber bought with her money, with money he owed, and something closed in his face like a door. "And he's right about the paper. A note against my land that I proved up 5 years for that I buried Ellen on. It's not mine anymore, not free and clear. It's got a string on it now, and the string runs to you, and a string can be bought." He looked at her. "I did that. I chose that. This morning I stood in the road and said we'll have walls up before the snow like a happy fool, and I never once thought that in making it a debt instead of a gift, I'd hung my whole life on whether I could pay it back before a man like Vane got hold of the note." Mini climax. "Then we pay it back," Elena said. "Fast. We work the land we sell. What it makes, we pay down the note quicker than any schedule, and we take the string out of Vane's reach before he can ever grab it. That's all. It's a problem, Rowan, not a catastrophe. We solve problems. We cleaned a well. We can beat a vulture. But she could see it wasn't landing. She could see that something had shifted in him the moment Silas Vane rode onto the burn, that the shame Vane had come to freshen had done exactly what Vane intended, and that Rowan Hale was no longer thinking about walls before the snow. He was thinking about the debt. He was thinking about how much he owed, and to whom, and what it made him, in the eyes of a town that already whispered, and what a man like Vane could do with a note held by a woman everyone knew had bought the scarred man's homestead out from under his own ruin. "How much can the land make in a season?" Rowan said. "Honest, best case, fields aren't even cleared yet. Say we get the house up and the barn up and stock bought and a crop in next spring, best case, what's it clear in a year?" Elena hesitated. Because she'd run these numbers. She'd run them a dozen times. And she knew the answer, and she knew what the answer would do to him. "Rowan." "How much?" "Against 12,000 at interest," she said quietly. Even a good year working it hard selling smart, she made herself say it. It's 8-10 years, to pay it clean, maybe more the first years till the land's really producing. Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. The number landed in Rowan Hale like a stone down a well. 10 years. She watched it hit him, watched him do the arithmetic she'd already done, and arrive where she'd arrived, and then keep going past where she'd stopped into a place she hadn't let herself follow him. 10 years of owing, 10 years of the note sitting in a strongbox with his land as its collateral, 10 years of it being buyable, sellable, 10 years of Silas Vane, 2 counties over, waiting for one bad harvest. One hard winter, one moment, when the woman holding the paper decided she'd rather have cash and a clean start. 10 years of being in the eyes of every soul at Cora Dean's counter, the man whose homestead a governess bought back for him. 10 years of being a kept man with a schedule. "No," Rowan said. "Rowan, there's a faster way." He turned to her, and the terrible resolve was full-formed now, and it frightened her more than any meanness ever had, because there was no reaching a man who'd gone this quiet and this calm. Cattle drives. A good hand can make real money on a drive 3-4 months up the trail, to the railheads in Kansas, hard work, hard pay, but cash. Elena, real cash. And a man who's willing to go up and back, drive after drive, season after season, no home to keep him, nothing to spend it on. His voice was picking up something now, something that horrified her, because it was almost like hope. A man like that could pay a debt in 3 years. Maybe 2, not 10. And every dollar of it earned with my own 2 hands on the trail mine. Clean. Not the land's, not yours, not the crops mine. And when it's paid, when the note's torn up and burned, then the land's free and clear again, and Vane can go to hell, and the town can say what it likes, because I'll have paid every cent like a man ought. Mini climax. Elena felt the ground go out from under everything she'd built. "You want to leave?" she said. "I want to pay." "You want to leave the homestead we're rebuilding, leave the walls before they're even up, and go north on a cattle drive for 3 years to pay back money I gave you. Gladly, money that was never a burden, that I never wanted back the way you're talking about paying it. That's just it." Rowan's voice rose for the first time, cracked and ragged. "You never wanted it back. That's the whole trouble. A debt the lender doesn't want repaid isn't a debt. Elena, it's a gift with a lie on top of it. It's charity, in a good coat. It's the Peterson boys offering to raise my barn all over again. Only worse, because this time, I signed a paper pretending it was different. But it's not different. You gave me my life back, with money I can't repay, in any way that leaves me a man, and every day I live in that house, I'll know it, and every soul in that town will know it, and Silas Vane will know it best of all, and he'll pick and pick at it until it splits. So you'll split it yourself first," Elena said. Her voice was shaking now, and she hated that it was shaking. "You'll do Vane's work for him. He rode out here to drive a wedge, and you're picking up the wedge and driving it in yourself harder than he ever could, because you'd rather break the thing than owe on it." Mini climax. That struck. She saw it strike, saw him flinch, and for 1 second she thought she'd reached him. Then the wall came up higher than she'd ever seen it, higher than the first day on the burn, and his voice went cold and flat and final. "Ellen died because I was too proud to owe $8, Rowan said. "You know what I've never told anyone I've spent 4 years telling myself the lesson was? Don't be too proud to take help. That's what I thought I was supposed to learn. Take the help. Owe the doctor. Ask the town. And then you came, and I took your help. I signed the paper. I let you build the house. I did the thing I thought I was supposed to learn." His voice broke. "And it feels worse, Elena. It feels worse than the pride ever did. Because now, I owe not $8, but $12,000, and I owe it to a woman I—" He stopped. Couldn't say it. "And I'm learning the lesson wasn't take the help at all. The lesson was, don't build your life on a foundation another person's paying for. Because it's not yours. It's never yours. It's theirs, and you're just living in it, and one day the paper changes hands and you find out you never owned a single board of it." Major twist. "That's vain talking," Elena said. "That's not you. He rode out here an hour ago and put those exact words in your mouth. Paper's paper doesn't matter who sweats in the walls, and you swallowed them whole because they taste like the poison you already wanted to drink." Maybe he's a vulture and still right. Vultures live off true things too. Rowan. She stepped close to him, closer than she'd ever stood close enough that he couldn't look away from either half of her face, and she made her voice as steady as she could make it with her whole chest caving in. "Listen to me. You are about to do the exact thing you did to Ellen. You hear me? The exact same thing. Not the money, the pride. Ellen didn't die because you owed a doctor. Ellen died because you'd rather she suffer than you feel small. And now, you'd rather kill the only real thing you've built since her than feel small owing a woman who'd tear that note up this very afternoon if you asked. You didn't learn don't build on borrowed ground. You learned nothing, Rowan, if you ride north. You just found a nobler sounding way to let your pride kill the thing you love. Again, the word hung in the air between them. Love. Neither of them had said it. She hadn't meant to say it now. It came out anyway because it was true. And because she'd finally understood that the only weapon left that might reach him was the same one she'd used the first night, the truth. The hard one. The one nobody else would say to his ruined face. Mini-climax. Rowan Hale stood absolutely still. Rowan Hale. And Elena watched with a horror that grew slower and more complete than any sudden blow, as the truth she'd thrown did not break the wall, but instead confirmed it, as she saw in his face that she'd only made it worse, that in naming the love she'd raised the stakes to exactly the height at which his pride could no longer bear to owe. "That's why I have to go," he said. Very quietly. "Don't you see? If I didn't, if this were just a debt, just money, I could carry it. Men carry debts. But it's not just money. Elena, you're right. It's the thing you said. And that's what I can't owe. I can't have you as the woman who saved me. I can't spend my life being the man you rescued. Every time you looked at me across that finished house, I'd see it kind. God, you'd never say it. You'd never once throw it in my face. You're too good for that. But I'd see it. I'd put it there. Saved man. Kept man. The governess bought him back, and it would rot everything. It would rot the way your grief rotted, the way the well rotted. It would rot us. So I have to go make it even. I have to come back a man who paid his own way, who owes you nothing, who can stand in front of you clean. And then," his voice cracked wide, "then maybe we talk about that paper in your trunk, the marriage one. Then it could be real. But not now. Not built on this. I won't marry you as your debtor. I'll marry you as your equal, or I won't marry you at all." Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. And Elena Cross understood finally completely the trap she was standing in. Because there was a terrible logic to it. A logic she couldn't wholly argue with, and that was the worst part. He wasn't wrong that a marriage built on a rescue might rot. He wasn't wrong that he'd carry the shame of it. He wasn't wrong that Vane would pick at it. Every single piece of what he said had truth in it, Vane's kind of truth, the kind that cuts, the kind you can't fight because it isn't a lie. But the conclusion was madness. The conclusion was to save the thing. I must leave the thing for years and risk losing it entirely on the chance that when I come back, it'll still be there and we can start clean. He would rather gamble everything on a distant, clean beginning than accept a present that had one flaw in it, the flaw of having been helped. "You'll lose it," she said. Her voice had gone quiet now, quiet as his. "That's what you can't see. You're so busy protecting the future version of us, the clean, equal someday version, that you'll destroy the real one that's standing right here." 3 years, Rowan. 2-3 more men die on those drives, men get hurt. Men come back changed. And even if you come back whole, and rich, and clean, and having paid every cent, I'll have spent 3 years alone in a house you couldn't bear to live in with me. And something will have died in that house while you were gone. Not my feeling for you. That won't die. But the thing we're building, the partnership, the standing in the ash together, that dies the day you ride north. You can't leave a growing thing for 3 years and expect to find it alive. You'll come back and pay your debt and stand in front of me clean and equal exactly like you want, and it'll be too late, because the house will be finished and empty, and I'll have learned to live in it without you, and you'll have paid $12,000 to buy back a pride that was never worth the price of one single ordinary day of the life we could have had. Mini climax. He looked at her, and for one moment, one last moment, she saw him waver, saw the good eye go bright, saw the man who'd set out a second cup in the night, the man who'd held her hand still over the fire, the man who'd said, "I'd want you to stay," and near choked on it. And then she watched the wall come up one final time, and she knew before he opened his mouth that she'd lost. "I've already sent word to the trail boss," Rowan said. "Wire went out from Cora's this morning, before Vane ever rode up. I'd been thinking on it since the papers got signed, thinking on how long 10 years is how a man could do it faster on the trail." He couldn't meet her eyes now. "Vane didn't put it in my head, Elena. He just confirmed it, made it certain. I'd already half decided this morning standing in that road even while I was saying we. That's the truth, the ugliest truth I've got. I said we'll have walls up before the snow, and in the same breath I was already planning how to leave, because I couldn't stand the size of what I owed the woman who'd made the we possible. Major twist, mini cliffhanger. The betrayal of it took her breath. Not the leaving, the timing of the leaving. He'd stood in the road that bright morning and let her be glad. Let her believe the hardest part was behind them. Let her build a whole afternoon of hope, and the wire was already sent. The decision was already made. Every soft thing he'd let her feel that morning had been a lie of omission the size of the sky. "You let me be happy," she said. "This morning, in the road, you knew, and you let me be happy anyway. I wanted you to have it, the one morning. Don't." Her voice shook, and she let it. "Don't you dare frame your cowardice as a kindness. You didn't let me be happy for my sake. You let me be happy because you couldn't stand to watch my face fall while you were still standing next to me. You wanted to be gone before I found out. That's not kindness, Rowan. That's the same thing you did to Ellen. You'd rather she suffer quietly than watch you suffer the truth. You'd rather I be happy on a lie for one morning than have to stand in front of me and be honest and small. You are still doing it, even now. Even leaving, you're doing the same coward's thing." Mini climax. He took it. He didn't fight it. That was almost the worst part, that he stood there and let her name it and didn't raise the wall to swing back. Just took it, like a man taking a whipping. He'd decided he deserved, and had decided also would not change his course by 1 inch. "When?" she said. When he didn't answer harder. "When do you ride north?" "Drive gathers at the railhead in 11 days. I'd want to be there early. So..." His jaw worked. "A week, maybe less." "A week." She laughed, and it was an awful sound, and she heard how awful it was and couldn't stop it. "A week. And in that week you'll finish the house, won't you? You'll work like a demon and get the walls up and the roof on so you can ride away and tell yourself you left me safe in a finished home instead of alone in a wreck. So the leaving looks like providing. So you can carry the picture with you up the trail, Elena safe in the house I built her before I went to pay for it. That's the story you'll tell yourself for 3 years, isn't it? That's the story that lets you sleep. She saw from his face that it was exactly the story. That she'd read him again all the way down, the way she'd read him the first night over the fire, and that reading him true had never once, not one single time, been enough to change what he did with the truth. Mini-climax. Yes, Rowan said. Because he wouldn't lie to her now. That was the one mercy left in him, and it was a cruel one. That's the story. I'll finish the house. I'll leave you safe in it. And I'll go pay what I owe. And I'll come back clean, and I'll ask you about that paper, and I'll pray to God you're still there and it's not too late. He finally looked at her both halves of his ruined face, and his eyes were wet, and he did not wipe them. I know what you think this is. You think it's my pride killing the thing again, same as Ellen. Maybe you're right. Maybe in 3 years I'll stand at your grave. No, I don't mean that. I mean I'll stand in that empty house and understand I threw away the only good thing left to me for a pride that wasn't worth one ordinary day. Maybe. Maybe you're right about all of it. His voice dropped to almost nothing. But I have tried, Elena. I have tried for 4 years to lay this pride down, and I cannot do it. And I am too old and too burned to change my own nature now. This is the man the fire left. I'm sorry it's not a better one. You deserved a better one. But I can't hand you a house another soul paid for and call myself your husband. I can't. It would kill me slower than the drive ever could, and I'd take you down with me. Elena Cross stood in the ash of the homestead she'd crossed a country to save in front of the wall she'd spent every day since trying to bring down, and understood that she'd been wrong about the one thing she'd been surest of. She'd thought the truth could reach anyone. She'd built her whole self on it, the ledgers, the bolted door, the fortune, the standing in the ash. Tell the hard true thing, and it lands and it changes something. She'd reached Rowan Hale with the truth on the very first night, reached him deeper than the town ever had reached him, deeper, maybe, than his dead wife ever had. And it had not been enough. It was never going to be enough. Because some men will look their own destruction full in the face and understand it completely, and thank you for showing it to them so clearly, and do it anyway. Final mini cliffhanger. Finish the house then, Elena said. Her voice had gone very quiet and very steady, and the steadiness cost her more than screaming would have. Finish it. Get your walls up and your roof on. Leave me safe in it, since that's the story you need. She turned toward the frame of the house, the hired men, the lumber, the whole rising shape of everything that no longer meant what it was supposed to mean. But hear me on this, Rowan Hale, and carry it up the trail with you, since you're so fond of carrying things. You are not leaving to pay a debt. You're leaving because being loved by someone who saw the worst of you and stayed is the one thing in this world that scares you worse than the fire did. The fire only took your face. I saw all the way down, and I stayed, and you can't bear it because you don't believe you're worth staying for. And rather than let me prove you wrong every ordinary day for the rest of our lives, you'll ride 2,000 miles to prove yourself right. She didn't look back at him. Get to work, she said. The light's wasting, and the sooner it's finished, the sooner you can go. And Rowan Hale picked up his hammer and went to build his wife a house he never meant to live in, and the two of them worked side by side in the ash. All the rest of that long afternoon, finishing the thing they were losing board by board, nail by nail, in a silence louder than any words that had passed between them yet. They finished the house in 6 days, and every board of it was a wound. They worked like two people who'd agreed not to speak of the thing standing between them, and so spoke of nothing else without ever naming it. Hand me the level, meaning stay. This joist wants another nail, meaning don't go. Mind your shoulder on that lift, meaning I already can't bear the thought of you hurt 2,000 miles from where I can reach you. They built a whole language out of carpentry that week, a language with only one word in it, and neither of them said the word, and both of them heard it in everything. On the 4th day, the roof went on. Rowan stood on the ridge line nailing the last of the shingles, and Elena stood in the yard handing bundles up to the hired man on the ladder. And when the final shingle went down, Rowan didn't come off the roof right away. He sat up there astride the peak of the house he'd built and would not live in. And he looked out over the land, the cleared fields, the mended fence, the well running clean, all of it. The whole homestead risen out of the ash exactly as she'd promised him it could. That first cold morning, and Elena, watching from below, saw his shoulders start to shake. Mini climax. He thought she couldn't see. That was why he'd stayed up there. A man on a roof believes he's alone with the sky. She let him have it. She didn't call up. She didn't go for the ladder. She stood in the yard and watched the man she loved weep on the roof of the house he was about to abandon, and she understood that he was not crying because he was leaving. He was crying because he wanted to stay and couldn't let himself, and knew the difference. And that was the whole tragedy of Rowan Hale in one picture. A man who could see the good life clear as the fields below him, close enough to touch, close enough to live in, and who would climb down off that roof and walk away from it, because some ruined thing inside him had decided he wasn't allowed to have it. When he finally came down, his eyes were dry and his face was set, and neither of them said a word about the roof. Cora Dean rode out on the 5th day. She came in her buckboard with a ham and 2 loaves, and a look on her weathered face, like a woman coming to a funeral, because in every way that mattered, she was. Word had gone all through Harlow's Pass by then. Rowan Hale was riding north on the drive, leaving the governess in the house her money built, going to pay his debt like a man. Half the town thought it noble. Cora Dean was not half the town. "You almighty fool," she said to Rowan before she'd even climbed down. "You blessed, God-forsaken, prideful fool of a man." Mini climax. "Come to say goodbye, Cora. Come to talk sense, but I can see from your face I'm 11 years too late for that." She got down heavy and shoved the ham at Elena without looking at her, a kindness done sideways. "I extended you credit the winter Ellen passed. Did you know that—" "Course you didn't. You were half mad with grief, and I ran it through the books quiet, so your pride wouldn't catch it. Flour, salt, pork, coffee, all that black winter. I never once asked to be paid." Her voice was rising. "You want to know why Ellen really—" "Cora!" Low, a warning. "No? You'll hear it. You'll hear it once from someone who was there. Ellen came to me that winter, walked 4 miles in the snow behind your back because you'd forbidden her to take charity. Came to my store and begged me for credit for medicine, and I gave it gladly, and she made me swear not to tell you, because she knew. She knew, Rowan, that if you found out she'd owed me $8, you'd have taken it worse than her being sick. And by the time she'd swallowed her fear of your pride enough to come to me, she was already too far gone for the medicine to catch. She didn't die because you were too proud to owe a doctor." Cora's voice cracked like a whip. "She died because you'd built a house so proud that a dying woman was more afraid of your shame than of her own death. And now here you go again, same house, new wife. You learned nothing. Major twist, mini cliffhanger." The yard went silent. Elena stood frozen with the ham in her arms. Because this was new. This was worse than anything Rowan had told her over the fire. This was the true shape of Ellen's death, and Rowan had never known it had spent 4 years believing he'd killed his wife with his own delay. When the truth was worse, the truth was that his pride had built a wall so high, his own dying wife hadn't dared climb it to save herself. Rowan Hale had gone white, both halves of his face white as the shingles. "That's not—" His voice failed. "She never told me she went to you. She never told you a lot of things." Cora said gentler now because she'd landed the blow, and there was no cruelty left in her only grief. "That's what living with a proud man does, Rowan. It don't make the folks around you strong. It makes them hide. It makes a sick woman walk 4 miles in the snow rather than let you see her need help. It makes a governess with a fortune dress her rescue up as a loan just to get you to take it. Everybody who loves you spends their whole life managing your pride, tiptoeing round it, lying to it, protecting it, and it eats them. It ate Ellen. And now—" She looked at Elena, and her eyes were wet. "Now it's fixing to eat this one, and this one crossed a country for you, and had the sand to walk onto your burn when the whole town told her to run, and you're going to ride north and leave her to rattle around alone in a house full of your pride and call it paying your debt." Mini climax. Rowan didn't answer. He couldn't. He'd sat down somewhere in Cora's telling on the edge of the new porch, the porch he'd built, and wouldn't sit on again. And he had his face in his hands, and his shoulders were shaking, the way they'd shaken on the roof, only worse, now silent and terrible. Cora watched him a moment. Then she climbed back up into her buckboard because she'd said what she came to say, and there was no undoing a wire already sent. No unbooking a man from a drive he'd set his whole ruined soul on. "I'll not come to see you off," she told him. "I've seen enough men ride north to know how many come back the same, and it's none. The trail changes a man, or it kills him, one or the other. So whatever you are right now, Rowan Hale, whatever's left in you, that this woman managed to wake, say goodbye to it too, because it won't survive the drive. Nothing tender does." She snapped the reins. "God keep you, I mean that. Somebody's got to, since you won't keep yourself." And she drove off and left the two of them alone with the truth about Ellen sitting in the yard between them like a body. Mini climax. Elena set the ham on the porch rail. She came and sat down beside him, not touching, and for a long while she let him break. When he finally spoke, his voice was wrecked past anything the fire had done to it. 4 years, he said. 4 years I thought I knew the worst of it. That I waited too long for the doctor. I built my whole penance on that every day out here in the ash. Every time I refused a hand, I was doing it for her, you understand, punishing myself for her. And it turns out I never even knew what I did. She walked 4 miles in the snow, behind my back, afraid of me. He looked at Elena with something shattered in his good eye. The woman I loved more than my own life was more afraid of my pride than of dying. What kind of man builds that? What kind of house is that to live in? "The kind you're about to leave me in," Elena said quietly. Major twist. It wasn't cruel. It was the truest thing she had, and she'd learned by now that the truth was the only tool that ever touched him, even when it never changed his course. "Cora's right," Elena went on. "That's the thing you should be hearing under all of it, Rowan. Not the guilt about Ellen. The guilt's just more pride. It's pride wearing mourning clothes. It's you making even her death about how much you have to suffer for it. Hear the other thing. Everyone who's ever loved you has spent themselves managing your pride. Ellen hid from it and died. Cora lied to it to feed you. And I." Her voice caught. "I dressed up the one gift I had as a loan, put your land up. As collateral, handed a vulture the exact tool to ruin you all, because it was the only shape of help your pride would swallow. I warped the thing I was trying to do to fit through the narrow door of what you'd accept. And now the loan's the reason you're leaving. Don't you see the shape of it? Your pride made me disguise the gift, and the disguise is what's driving you off. If you'd just let me give it to you, free, no note, no collateral, no debt, there'd be nothing to pay back, and no reason to ride north, and no note for Vane to ever buy. Your pride didn't just refuse my help. It bent my help into the very knife that's cutting us apart." Mini climax. Rowan was quiet a long time. "You're saying it's my fault," he said. Not angry, just hollow. "I'm saying it's your pride's fault, and you keep insisting they're the same thing, and they don't have to be." She turned to him. "That's the whole hope of it, Rowan. That's the thing I've been trying to make you see since the first night. Your pride is not you. It's the thing the fire left. You said so yourself. The one thing the fire didn't take. But a thing that's left can be set down. You act like it's your bones. It's not your bones. It's a coat you've worn so long you forgot you can take it off. Ellen died with you never once taking it off. Don't make me the second woman who watches you keep it on until it kills what we have." She saw him waver. God help her, she saw him waver right there on the porch, with Ellen's true death fresh in the yard, and Cora's words still ringing. She saw the man come up almost to the surface, saw his hand move an inch toward hers, and then she watched him do the thing she was coming to understand he would always do. She watched him take the wavering itself, the softness, the almost, and turn it into one more reason he had to leave. Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. "If I stay now," he said slowly, "I stay because Cora shamed me into it. Because you argued me out of it. Because I got soft on a porch and couldn't hold my own course. He shook his head. And that's no better than the dead Elena. Worse maybe. A man who stays because he got talked out of leaving is a man who's still not choosing his own life. He's just being managed. Same as Ellen managed me, same as Cora, same as you're doing right now this minute. Good wise loving all of it, but managing. And I'll not build a marriage on being managed into it. Don't you see even this? Even you being right. Especially you being right. If I stay because you out-reasoned me, then I'm your project after all the broken thing you fixed with a clever tongue instead of a checkbook, and it's the same rot in a different dress. Elena felt the ground go out one final time, and this time she understood there was no bottom under it, because she'd finally found the true shape of the trap, and the true shape of the trap had no floor. There was nothing she could do. If she let him go, she lost him. And if she reached him, if she was wise enough, true enough, loving enough to actually change his mind, then, in his ruined logic, she'd only proved him a managed man, and he'd have to leave to prove he wasn't. Every path led north. His pride had built a room with no door in it, and he'd walked her into it, and the more she loved him, the tighter it closed, because a man determined to owe no one could not even be allowed to owe her his own change of heart. Mini-climax. So there's nothing, she said, barely a whisper. There's nothing I can say. If I fail to reach you, you leave. And if I succeed in reaching you, you have to leave to prove I didn't. You've built it so the leaving wins no matter what happens. You've made yourself impossible to save Rowan on purpose, because being saved is the one thing you decided you can't survive. He didn't deny it, he couldn't. She watched him hear his own trap named out loud, and she watched him recognize it as true, and she watched this was the part that broke her, finally all the way after everything she watched it, not matter. Same as the first night, same as always. She could show him the whole architecture of his own destruction, lay it bare, make it plain as the fields below the roof, and he would study it and nod and thank her for the clarity and do it anyway. I ride at dawn, Rowan said. Mini-climax. The last night neither of them slept. They didn't touch. They didn't speak much. They sat in the finished house, the real house, with walls and a roof and a door that closed. The house she'd promised him from the ashes, and they let the fire burn down in the new stone hearth he'd laid with his own hands, and the terrible irony of it sat in the room with them, that they were spending their first and last night together in the very thing that had driven them apart. The house was the proof of everything they could have been. It was also the debt that was taking him away. It was the gift and the knife, both exactly as she'd named it, and now they had to sit inside it and feel it be both at once. Near midnight, out of the dark, Rowan spoke. "The paper," he said. "The marriage one. In your trunk." Elena's breath caught. "What about it? Don't burn it." His voice was very low. "When I said the first night you could burn it, don't. I've thought on it every day since, and He stopped. Started again, and it came out of him like pulling a nail out of green wood, slow and against the grain. "I want to know it's there. Up the trail. In the dark when I'm cold, and there's 2,000 miles between me and everything I want to know. There's a paper in a trunk, in a house with my name on the deed, and a woman in it who signed her name next to us someday. I've no right to ask you to wait. I'm not asking. A woman'd be a fool to wait on a man who chose a cattle drive over her, and you're no fool, you're the least fool I ever met." His voice broke clean in half. "But don't burn it. Let me carry the maybe. It's the only thing I'm taking north that's worth carrying." Major twist, mini cliffhanger. And Elena Cross, who had held her steadiness through every blow since the stagecoach, who had not wept at the ruin of his face, or the truth of his cowardice, or the death of Ellen in the snow, Elena Cross broke there in the dark, in the finished house, and she did not try to hide it from him. "You want me to wait," she said through it, "but you won't ask me to. You want the paper kept, but you won't stay to honor it. You want the maybe Rowan, but not the yes, because the maybe is safe, the maybe owes nothing, the maybe can be carried up a trail and set down again with no debt attached. You want to love me from 2,000 miles off where it can't touch you, or cost you, or save you. You want the one version of me that asks nothing of your pride a memory, a paper in a trunk, a someday that never comes due. She wiped her face, furious at her own tears, furious at him, furious at the whole ruined architecture of the man. I won't do it. I won't be your maybe. I won't keep a marriage paper warm for a man who'd rather carry my picture up a cattle trail than sit across a table from the real thing. If you ride tomorrow, you ride from all of it, the house, the land, the paper me. I'll not send you off with a soft someday to keep you comfortable in the cold. If you're going to break this row and hail, you'll break the whole of it with your eyes open, and you'll carry that north instead. Not a maybe, a no. The no you built yourself. Mini climax. He looked at her across the dying fire in the finished house. Then it's a no, he said, quietly, accepting the whole weight of it the way he accepted everything true and did nothing to change it. You're right. It's not fair to carry your maybe while I take everything from you. If I go clean. No claim, no paper, no someday I keep warm at your expense. He stood. I'll leave the deed. The house and the land are yours free and clear. No, don't argue, hear me for once. You built it. Your money, your sweat, your faith. It was never mine, not really. I only proved up the dirt. The home is yours. I'll sign it over to you before I ride witnessed legal in Cora's book. And the note? His jaw set. The note stands. I'll pay it from the trail every cent, to an address not to a wife. A debt paid to a landowner I once knew. That's all. That's clean. That's not clean, Elena whispered. That's just lonely with paperwork. It's the only clean I know how to make. He stood in the doorway of the house he'd built, half in the last of the firelight, half in the dark, exactly as he'd stood the first day on the burn. And he was still at the end the same man, a man who could see the whole good life laid out in front of him and would sign it away rather than accept he was allowed to live in it. Get some sleep, Elena, or don't. I'll be gone before the light. It's easier if you don't come out to watch. Final mini cliffhanger. She didn't sleep. She lay in the finished house and listened to him not sleep either, the two of them awake on opposite sides of a wall he'd built with his own hands. And somewhere in the black hours before dawn, she heard him rise and heard him gather his few things, and heard the small sounds of a man leaving quietly so as not to be stopped. She'd said she wouldn't come out to watch. She got up anyway. She came to the door in the gray almost light, and she stood on the porch he'd built and would never sit on, and Rowan Hale was already mounted, already turned north, a saddled horse and a bedroll, and a man riding away from the only thing that ever saw him whole. He heard the door. He stopped. He didn't turn all the way around, just his head, just enough that she saw the ruined half of his face against the coming light. For one moment, neither of them said anything, and the whole story hung in that silence. The stagecoach, the ashes, the well, the fire, the $12,000, the loan, the vulture, the roof he'd wept on. Ellen dead in the snow, the house standing finished and empty behind her, the paper still unburned in the trunk, everything they'd built, and everything he was throwing away. You saw me, Rowan Hale said. His voice barely carried. All the way down. Nobody ever did that. I want you to know I know it. Whatever else, I know what you were. I know what I'm leaving. And then he turned north and touched his heels to the horse and rode away into the gray up toward the trail and the railhead and the 2,000 miles, getting smaller and smaller against the pale morning, until Elena Cross stood alone on the porch of the finished house. The home her fortune built. The home that could not build the one thing they'd needed, and watched the man she loved disappear into the north to pay a debt that had never once been the thing that stood between them. The house was finished, and she was alone in it. She did not fall apart. That was the thing the town waited for and never got. All through that first week, Harlow's Pass held its breath for the news that the governess had packed her trunk and taken the eastbound stage, or worse, that she'd been found sitting in the ash again like Rowan before her, gone strange with grief. Cora Dean drove out on the third day, braced for either. What she found instead was Elena Cross in the ruined gray dress on her knees in the cleared field planting, Winter wheat, Elena said before Cora could ask. She didn't stop working. It's late for it, but not too late if the frost holds off. Rowan cleared these fields before he left. Seems a waste to let cleared ground sit. Mini climax. Cora climbed down slow. Child, you don't have to work this land alone. You've a fortune. You could hire it done, or sell it, or I know what I could do. Elena sat back on her heels. I could hire it done. I could sell it and go east and marry a clerk with an unburned face like Rowan said I would, and tell this story at a supper someday, and everyone would say what a narrow escape I had. Her voice was steady, flat worn smooth, like a stone in a creek. But I didn't cross a country to hire things done and go home. I came to build something honest with dirty money. And I did. The house stands. The well runs clean. And now there's a field, and the field doesn't care that the man rode north. The field just wants planting. So I'm planting it. For him, you waiting on him. And Elena Cross said the thing that changed the shape of her grief. No, she said. Not for him. He made sure of that. Took the maybe with him, left me a no, signed the house over clean. He rode off owing me nothing and asking me nothing exactly like he wanted. She pressed a seed into the dirt. I'm not planting this for Rowan. I'm planting it for me. Because I spent 3 years thinking a fortune could wash me clean, and I was wrong. Money doesn't wash anything. But this, she pushed her hands into the soil. Work that feeds someone on land that's honestly mine? Maybe this does. He couldn't stay to be saved. Fine. I'll save the one thing I still can, myself, on my own ground with my own hands. Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. Cora Dean looked at her a long moment, and something in the old woman's weathered face broke and mended at the same time. He was wrong about you, Cora said quietly. He said you'd wait like a fool. You're not waiting at all. You're living, right through the middle of it. She shook her head. That man rode 2,000 miles to become worth you, and you went and became worth yourself while he was still saddling the horse. He'll come back 3 years from now having earned his pride, and you'll already be a whole person who doesn't need it. God, the waste of it. The blessed waste. Elena didn't answer. She just kept planting one seed at a time into the ground that was finally only hers. The letters started in the fall. The first came from a railhead in Kansas, in a hand she didn't know Rowan had cramped, careful a man not used to writing. It held no softness. It held a bank draft and 4 lines. First payment enclosed. $90 against the note. Drive went hard. Lost 2 men to the river. Rowan Hale. No dear. No how do you fare. No is the house warm. Just the debt and a dead man's mention and his name. She cashed the draft. She entered it in Cora's book against the note witnessed legal exactly as he'd wanted a payment to a landowner from a hand she once knew. And then she sat at the table in the finished house, and she did not write back because he had not asked her to, because he had built it, so there was nothing to write back to, and because she had promised herself she would not be his maybe. Mini climax. But she kept the letter. She told herself it was for the records. A payment needed its paper. That was all. She put it in the strongbox with the note and the deed and the marriage contract she had not burned, because he'd asked her not to that last night, and she'd said she wouldn't keep it warm for him, and she hadn't. She'd left it cold in the box, but she hadn't burned it either, and there was a difference she refused to examine. The letters came every few months following the drives. A railhead in Kansas, a cow town in Nebraska, a wire office in the Dakota Territory. Always the same. A draft, a line about the work, the count of the money owed and the money left. 200 against the note. Winter on the northern range is a killing thing. Rowan Hale. Never a question. Never an opening. A man paying a debt to a stranger exactly as advertised, and she understood he was doing it on purpose, that every cold-closed letter was a discipline a man holding himself to, the clean, lonely thing he'd chosen, refusing himself even the small warmth of asking whether she still stood on the porch he'd built. And Elena worked the land. Mini climax. The wheat came up. The first harvest was small, but it was real, and it was hers, and she sold it in Harlow's Pass, and entered even that against the note in her own hand, paying down Rowan's debt with the fruit of Rowan's cleared fields. So that the note shrank from two directions at once, his cash from the north, her wheat from the south, the two of them tearing down the debt together across 2,000 miles, without ever once speaking of it. The town changed toward her slowly the way small towns do. She was no longer the fool governess who'd walked onto a burn. She was the woman who'd raised a homestead out of ash, and worked it alone, and paid a proud man's debt with her own harvest, and never once complained or wept where anyone could see. The women who'd pretended not to listen on the boardwalk that first day now nodded to her in the street. Del Farrow mended her fence in the spring and wouldn't take pay, and when she pressed him, he said gruff, "You carried your own trunk 20 feet into that ash the first day. I've thought on it ever since. Man doesn't take money from a woman like that. Man just fixes her fence." And she let him, because she'd learned finally the thing Rowan never could, that letting a neighbor mend your fence for nothing did not make you kept. It made you belong to. It made you part of a place. Major twist or mini cliffhanger. Silas Vane came back in the second spring. He rode onto her land the same way he'd ridden onto the burn. Good coat, clean hat. The smile of a man who found other people's ruin amusing. And he sat his horse at the edge of her wheat and looked at the standing house and the worked fields, and the fat, honest crop. And the smile thinned. "Miss Cross." He touched his hat. "You've done well for yourself. Better than well. I confess I didn't expect it." He looked at the fields. "I hear Hale's still north. 2 years on the trail now, paying his little debt $100 at a time." He let the contempt show. A man that proud riding drag in the dust for 2 years to pay back money his own wife would have forgiven well. It's a kind of madness. But it serves my purpose, because a debt half paid is still a debt, Miss Cross, and a note against land is still a note, and I've come as I said I would to make you an offer for the paper. Cash, today. More than the note's worth. You take my money, you walk away clean, and I hold Hale's debt, and when he misses a payment as men on the trail eventually do, I take the land. Simple. Fair. You know I pay fair. Mini climax. Elena Cross wiped the dirt from her hands and stood up in her own wheat and looked at Silas Vane, and she was not the woman he'd met on the burn 2 years gone. That woman had been sharp and afraid, guarding a fortune and a past. This woman had buried her fear in the same ground as her wheat. "No," she said. "You haven't heard the figure. I don't need the figure." She walked toward him, unhurried through her own crop. 2 years ago you rode onto this man's ashes to remind him of the worst thing he ever did, because you knew shame was the wedge that had split him off his land. And it worked, Mr. Vane. I'll give you that. You helped drive him north. But you made one mistake, and you're making it again right now. She stopped at his stirrup and looked up at him. "You think the note is the thing you want. It isn't. The note's just paper. The thing you want is the land, and the land is mine. Now, deeded, witnessed, free, and clear, signed over to me before Rowan ever rode. You can buy the note off me, and you'll hold a debt, yes. But the debt's against a man who is paying it on time every quarter from the trail more faithfully than any banker ever saw a debt paid. He will not miss a payment. Do you understand what kind of man rides drag in the dust for 2 years, rather than owe a woman he loves? That man does not miss a payment. You'd buy a note that'll be paid in full inside a year, and you'd never touch one board of this land, because the land was never his to lose. It was mine. You came to collect ashes, Mr. Vane. There aren't any left. I planted them." Mini climax. Silas Vane looked down at her from his good horse for a long moment. Then he did the thing men like him do when the calculation stops favoring them. He touched his hat, and he smiled the thin smile, and he made it sound like his own idea to leave. "Well," he said, "a man knows when a field's been harvested before he got to it." He gathered his reins. "You're a rare one, Miss Cross. Hale's a fool 3 times over for burning his face on a dead woman's horse, for selling that horse to me, and for riding off and leaving you standing in a crop like this. If he had any sense, he'd have stayed and grown old rich beside you." He turned his horse. But then if men had sense, I'd be out of business. Good day." He rode off her land and never came back. And Elena Cross stood in her wheat and watched the last threat to everything she'd built grow small against the horizon and vanish. And she felt no triumph. She felt tired. She felt like a woman who had won every battle in a war whose only prize she'd already lost. Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. The last letter came at the start of the third winter. She knew it was different before she opened it because it was thicker and because her name on the front was not in his cramped, careful hand, but in his hand gone somehow slower, more deliberate, a man taking care over each letter of Elena Cross in a way he never had over first payment enclosed. Inside was a bank draft larger than any before it, and a note in Cora's book would show when she entered it that this draft paid the debt in full. $12,000 and every cent of interest cleared over 3 years of drives, the last of it here in her hand on a winter afternoon. The note was dead. Rowan Hale owed her nothing. And this time, for the first time in 3 years, there were words. She read them standing up, and then she had to sit down, and then she read them again, sitting. "Elena, this clears the note. I've counted it 4 times. You'll count it too, and you'll find it right because I made it right every cent the way I said I would. So it's done. I'm no man's debtor now. I'm nobody's kept man. I earned back every dollar in the dust and the cold, and I stood at the pay window in Ogallala this month, and understood I'd finally become the thing I rode north to become, a man who owes you nothing. And Elena, it is the emptiest thing I have ever been in my life." Mini climax. She kept reading. Her hands were not steady. Cora was right. You were right. Ellen was right, though she never got to say it walking 4 miles in the snow rather than face what I'd built. I spent 3 years learning the wrong lesson, same as I spent 4 years learning it before, and I have finally. God help me learned the true one, and it cost me you to learn it, and that is the joke of my whole ruined life. The lesson was, never don't be helped. The lesson was never pay every debt. The lesson was a man who cannot bear to owe anything can never truly belong to anyone. You told me that at the fire the first night, and I heard it, and I did not understand it, and I rode 2,000 miles to understand it. Owing you was never the thing that made me less. Owing you was the only thing that ever made me part of something. I burned that down to keep my pride clean, and now my pride is spotless, and I am alone, and the two facts are the same fact. I am not asking you to wait. You told me on the last night you wouldn't be my maybe, and you were right to say it, and I have honored it. I never once let myself write you a soft word in 3 years, because I had no right to keep you warm while I kept myself clean. But the note is paid now. There is no debt between us. I am not your debtor asking a favor. I am just a man clean and clear, and owing nothing. And for the first time I can ask you the only thing I ever wanted to ask, with no money hanging on it and no pride left to protect, because I have spent it all. The paper is still in your trunk. I know it is because you said you wouldn't burn it. And I have never once known you to say a thing that wasn't true. I am coming south. I will be at Harlow's Pass by the first thaw. I am not coming to the house is yours, and I'll not walk into it uninvited. I'll be at Cora's. And if you want me to keep riding, if the field is yours now, and the belonging is yours now, and there is no room in it for a fool who took 3 years to learn what you taught him in one night by a fire, then send word to Cora, and I will ride on, and never trouble your ground again. But if there is still a someday in that trunk, Elena, I am finally the equal. You told me you'd marry or not marry at all. I earned it the hard, stupid way. Ask me to stay, just once. Ask me, and I will never ride north again. Rowan Hale. Major twist. Elena Cross sat at the table in the finished house with the letter in her hands, and she did not know for a long moment whether she was going to laugh or weep or throw the whole thing in the fire. Because he had done it again. He had even now, even in surrender, even paid in full and humbled, and finally, right, he had put it back on her. Ask me to stay. Just once. He would not simply come home. He needed to be asked. He needed, even at the very end, to receive his belonging as something granted rather than something he'd reached out and taken, because a man who could not bear to owe could not even bear to owe the first move. She understood sitting there that Rowan Hale would never fully change. The pride was in his bones after all, or near enough. He'd bent it, broken himself against it, learned its lesson at ruinous cost. But he'd still built her one last little room to grant him entry. Still made his return contingent on her word. Still could not just walk up the road and knock. And she understood, too, that she got to decide what that meant. Mini-climax. She could send word to Cora, tell him to ride on. She had every right. He'd left her alone in a house for 3 years to pay a debt she never wanted paid. She'd become a whole person without him. Worked the land, paid the note faced down. Vane earned the town she needed. Nothing he had. She could close the trunk and let the paper yellow and grow old on her own ground complete, needing no one exactly as he'd made her by leaving. Or she could see the thing clearly, the way she'd always seen him. Clearly see that a man asking to be told to stay was still a broken thing. Yes, but a broken thing that had spent 3 years and everything he had learning to reach. Even if he could only reach this far, even if the last inch had to be hers. She'd said the first night that she didn't need saving, that what she needed was a purpose and a place to put her hands. She had those now both, and she'd made them herself. The question the letter really asked was not, "Will you save me?" It was, "Now that you need nothing, is there still room in your whole life for a man who took the long, stupid road home?" That was a different question. That was a question a whole person could answer freely from strength, owing nothing, the only kind of yes that had ever been worth anything. Mini-climax. She got up from the table. She went to the strongbox. She took out the marriage contract that she had not burned in 3 years. Cold in the box kept, but not kept warm exactly as she'd promised. And she unfolded it on the table beside his letter, the 2 papers together, the debt that was dead and the someday that wasn't. Then she got her coat. She rode into Harlow's Pass in the last hard cold before the thaw, and she went to Cora Dean's store, and Cora looked up from the counter and saw Elena's face, and went very still. "He wrote," Cora said, not a question. "He wrote. The note's paid. He's coming south by the first thaw. He'll come to you, not to the house." Elena set the letter on the counter. "He wants me to ask him to stay. He won't come otherwise. Even now, even after everything. He still needs to be asked." Cora read the letter. Her jaw worked. The nerve of the man. The blessed nerve. 3 years he leaves you and he comes back and makes you do the asking. She looked up. "You send him packing. You hear me? You've built a life a queen would envy, and you owe that scarred fool nothing. Tell him to ride on." Mini-climax. "No," Elena said. "Elena, Cora, listen to me, because you taught me half of what I know about this country, and I've one thing to teach you back." She took the letter and folded it. "You told me the first day that the shame's not in being helped, it's in letting a thing rot, because you're too proud to let anyone near it. You were talking about him. But it's true for me, too. If I send him packing to prove I don't need him, that's just his pride wearing my dress. That's me letting the good thing rot, because I'm too proud to admit I'd still rather have him than not, even after everything, even knowing exactly what he is. I don't need him. That's the whole point. I don't need him, so I get to want him freely from a whole life I built myself, and there's no shame in that. There's no charity in it either direction. Just 2 people who saw each other all the way down, and God help us both chose it anyway." Cora Dean looked at her for a long, long moment. And then the old woman's weathered face cracked into something between exasperation and wonder and grief and joy. All at once, the whole complicated weather of a person watching someone they love choose the hard, true thing. "What do you want me to tell him?" Cora said. Major twist. Mini cliffhanger. Elena Cross took a pen from Cora's counter and a scrap of paper from Cora's book, and she wrote 4 words and folded them and handed them across the counter. "When he comes," she said, "give him that, not before. Let him ride all the way south not knowing. Let him sit right there where you're standing and wait for it the way he made me wait 3 years, and then give it to him. And if he asks what it says, He won't ask. Elena almost smiled. He'll be too proud to ask. He'll just take it and read it. That's the one thing I can promise you about Rowan Hale. The thaw came late that year, mini-climax. He rode into Harlow's Pass on a gray morning at the very edge of spring 3 years older, trail worn to the bone, the ruined half of his face weathered now to match the whole. A man who'd spent everything he had becoming, worth a woman who'd stopped needing him, to be worth anything at all. He put up his horse. He walked to Cora Dean's store. He took off his hat at the door the way he had that first day when he'd wanted the whole county to witness his loan, and he stood in front of the counter where 3 years ago he'd sworn he'd owe every cent, like a man ought, and he'd done it. He'd paid it. He was clean, and he was terrified. Cora Dean looked at him a long moment. She did not smile. She reached under the counter and took out the folded scrap of paper Elena had left, and she held it a moment longer than she had to this old woman who'd extended credit to a dying girl in the snow, and carried the secret 4 years, who'd warned a governess off a burned man and been proven wrong, who'd watched the whole long ruinous circle of Rowan Hale's pride come round at last to this. She's not here, Cora said. She wouldn't come. Said you had to sit right where you're standing and wait, same as she waited. She held out the paper. She left you this. Said you'd be too proud to ask what it says. Said you'd just take it and read it. Her voice roughened. Prove her wrong for once in your life, Rowan Hale. Ask me. Ask me what your woman wrote. Mini-climax. And Rowan Hale stood in the store with his hat in his hands and his whole life hanging on a folded scrap of paper, and he did the hardest thing he had ever done, harder than the fire, harder than selling the mare, harder than 3 years in the dust. He did not take the paper. He did not read it proud and alone, the way he'd read everything alone, his whole ruined life. He said, in that scraped and broken voice out loud to another human being needing something and letting it be seen. What did she write, Cora? Please? I can't just tell me. Tell me what she wrote. Cora Dean's eyes went bright. Well, she said, I'll be. 3 years in a cattle drive, and it took all of it, but you finally learned to ask. She unfolded the paper and turned it so he could see Elena Cross's plain, sure hand. The 4 words she'd written and folded and left to wait for the man who'd made her wait. The 4 words that were not a maybe and not a someday, but a plain, hard, true thing, said from strength by a whole person who needed nothing and chose him anyway. Come home. Supper's on. And Rowan Hale, who had ridden 2,000 miles to become a man who owed nothing, and learned at the pay window in Ogallala that owing nothing was the emptiest thing a man could be, put down his pride at last in Cora Dean's store, all of it. The whole heavy coat he'd worn since before the fire, and he walked out into the thin spring light and got on his horse and rode the 2 miles home to the house. Another person's love had built the house he'd been too proud to live in, and this time he did not stop at the edge of the ash to be told to leave. This time he rode all the way up to the porch he'd built and never sat on, and Elena Cross was standing in the door of the home that was hers, free and clear, earned and honest, and needing no one. And she watched him come, and she did not go out to meet him, because she'd done her crossing already 3 years, and a country's worth of it, and it was his turn to cross the last of the ground. He got down off the horse. He walked up the steps of the porch, and Rowan Hale, for the first time in his life, walked through a door another person had opened for him, without once feeling smaller for it, walked into the house her fortune built, and her hands finished, and her patience kept, walked home, to the woman who had seen him all the way down, and stayed, and understood finally standing in the warm light of the home he'd nearly thrown away forever. That being helped had never made him less, and being loved had never made him owe, and the only debt that had ever mattered was the one he'd finally come home to pay in full, every day for the rest of his life at her table, with his pride set down at last on the floor of the house he should never have left. Pride can destroy what hardship cannot. But a man who learns even late, even at ruinous cost, to lay it down and let himself be loved, that man does not lose the fortune. He becomes worthy of it. And Elena Cross, who had crossed a country to save a stranger and saved herself instead, closed the door on the cold behind him, And there was no more ash left anywhere on that land because the two of them together had finally planted every last acre of it.